let me begin by thanking some of the sponsors for this year's series, Redfish Lake Lodge and the McNichol family, in memory of Roland McNichol, who is an avid FLS attendee and steward to the Sawtooths. Thank you. SEHA is a member. SEHA is a member-based, not-for-profit 501c3 organization. Our mission is to protect and advance the natural and cultural history of Idaho's Sawtooth Salmon River country through preservation and education. And they're wonderful, great partners for the Forest Service. We couldn't be luckier to have them. Our programs are funded by book and map sales at our sales outlets, donations, grants, and memberships. We hope that if you like our programs, you will consider supporting us by making a donation with our donation jar tonight, or becoming a member. Would anybody that's a current member please raise your hand? Wow, all right. Thank you for your support. We also have a drawing going on this year, which is right up here. It's an adventure pack. You can win a Gregory 28 pack, Fisher trekking poles, a solar light, and a bunch more goodies. So come check that out and buy a raffle ticket to go into the drawing. It retails for over $500. Tickets are only $5 for one, or $20 for 5 tickets. The drawing will be held at the Salmon Festival August 31st, and you don't have to be present to win, so jump in on that.
My name is Dave Kimpton, and I'll take 25 tickets.
All right, write them down before he leaves. Okay, we'd also like to invite you to become a part of history by purchasing a brick to be placed right here at our pathway, which you can see right here. This purchase will go towards helping us gather the funds to reconstruct a historic building that will be used to house 4 of our summer interns here at the Stanley Museum site.
Hi, my name is Jason. I'd like to buy 10 bricks.
10 more.
I second that.
So, as you know, tonight's lecture is Stories from Rangers Past, and I think it's going to be pretty colorful. With that, I'm going to have Matthew Bingman, the museum docent here at the museum, introduce the speakers. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all for coming to our 7th lecture series of the 2019 season. The 2019 lecture series will focus on the adventures, stories, and experiences we can all have here in the Sawtooths. We have a special trio for all of you tonight. We have Dave Kimpton, right here, Tom Kovalicky, and Jay Sevy. They're all here to entertain us with tales of their time working here in the Sawtooth National Forest. Dave will share some of his Dangerous Dave expeditions. Tom will share stories of his time as a ranger, and Jay will tell us of all the times he's had during his outdoor career. So please welcome Dave, Tom, and Jay with Stories from Rangers Past.
Is it squealing or is it... Can you hear me?
Yep.
Not too much? All right. I have a special presentation since we're supposed to be... This is supposed to be levity, I think. So I have a special presentation from our wonderful leader. The one and only exalted and supreme leader of the Stooges in Sawtooth Valley. Well, Gary Gadwat, please.
Photograph used of you 3 gentlemen, Larry, Mo, and Curly.
Curly here. So he's our inspiration. So I was going to talk just since it's supposed to be levity, I want to show you what to use when you all folks are having an argument with your sweetie or significant other. This always works. It says, if I agree with you, we would both be wrong. Now one more on Gary Gadwat. Do you know what the definition of a bar stool is? It's what Gary Gadwa stepped in when he was letting the bar out of the trap. All right, maybe enough of that. Just really briefly, I want to give you just a short history of this. The worst trouble I've ever been in my life has to do with this historical monument here. Because when I was in the Forest Service, Gray Reynolds was the superintendent, and the Forest Service gets on these kicks, and so they built a they built a new ranger station, and this one was supposed to be sold and eliminated. And if you want to make me mad, it's you go ahead and sell and eliminate an old Forest Service ranger station. And then the Forest Service comes back 30 years later, pays $100 times more to get it back because it's hysterical, or historical even. So I went to Gray Reynolds, and they were preparing the contract, and I said, we've got to save this. And the old telephone room was back there, and that was for the whole valley. Ernestine was the one that was running that. Is that better? So anyway, Gray put me down and said, no, got to get off the floodplain. So, well, that was hot. So I came back, and I got a hold of SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office in Boise, and they came up and looked at it, and they went, this is historic. So they went ahead and declared it, which ruined the contract to sell it, which I got called in, and I've never had a dressing down like that in my life. Ooh, baby. If he could have fired me, he would have fired me. So I stood up for myself, and I said, darn it, you know, it's the right thing to do. Well, I said, damn it. But anyway, so I think maybe Tom has something to say on that, too.
Well, all I know is that it cost me 2 bottles of whiskey to save your ass from being fired, you know. So, and I'm happy about that. But I can bounce back with another ugly incident when the SNRA was up and running. This was closed down. They wanted to destroy the Forest Service hierarchy in Ogden. Wanted to destroy the 4th of July Creek Ranger Station. And I went through the roof, and I went and I talked to the regional forester in Ogden, and I said, please send out your head engineer, because he was the one that was responsible for building. And I said, come on out and visit with us. We want to show you why we need to keep the 4th of July Creek Ranger Station. And he did come out. And we treated him well, you might say. And when he left, he went back and he told his staff, the buildings stay. So that dovetails right into keeping both historic ranger stations going.
That's true. I'm a little irritated. I was only worth 2 bottles of whiskey. Then, one night, it's all that'll last. Well, I think for the time being, let's hear from Jay. He was here quite a while ago. Go ahead.
Well, I did.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I did pave the way for these 2 knotheads. So I'm kind of going to go first here. Public speaking is not in my quiver of talents, but I have been known to tell a story or 2, and I've fabricated on occasion. Anyway, based on advice from my wife, I'm going to not ignore her advice, and so I'm going to tell you about some of my childhood, since it will give you a little insight into life in the Forest Service in an earlier era. So I think it sticks with the theme of things of Tales from Rangers Past, because it's all about people who have been in the Forest Service. My father was a district ranger. His first assignment was in the town of Austin, Nevada. And let me tell you something that is a long ways out. It's out in nowhere. And so we were stationed there, and this came from my wife. My mother told my wife this story, is that they were stationed there in Austin, and there were only 2 women in town. My mother and a lady of the night. My mother would see each other on the street, and my mother said we didn't speak. She was a pretty stout Methodist. Anyway, after, you're going to think that the Forest Service had a propensity for stationing us in the mining towns, and so our next assignment was Atlanta, Idaho, just over the hill here, about 20 or 25 air miles. And we were there all year round, so we wintered there, and in the winter we were snowed in, totally. And we'd get occasional supplies by ski plane. And I went to school there in a one-room schoolhouse, 6 grades, maybe 12 kids, I can't remember. But anyway, the schoolhouse was about a mile and a half away from the ranger station. And of course it snowed in Atlanta, probably more than it did now, but anyway, on a snowy morning my father would get up early and pack a track for me to follow to get back and forth to school. So we were in Atlanta, and like I say, we were snowed in, the roads were closed, and I had an appendicitis attack just as the road between Boise and Atlanta opened. And my folks were able to get me to the hospital in time to, I guess, save my life. When our next station was down the river ways at a ranger station called Cottonwood. And the Cottonwood Creek was on a creek that ran into Arrow Rock Reservoir. And so in the wintertime, we actually wintered at Idaho City. And like I say, we have a propensity for being in mining towns. And there's another one. And in Idaho City, I went to the 2nd grade. And one of the things our children would do at noon hour when we were out for lunch, the favorite sport was to do what they call hooky bobbing. You ever heard of that? Oh, yeah. So anyway, you'd hide behind a snowdrift and the car would slow down enough to let you run out and grab a bumper and go for a nice long ride on the slick streets of Idaho City. Well, a school teacher caught me at it one day, and I spent the afternoon in the closet, in the corner of the closet. Anyway, we had various other assignments throughout the years, but those are probably the most pertinent to what I want to talk about. Well, since I didn't know any other life, I went to forestry school. I managed to graduate. I should say just managed. And I got enough hours in range and forestry subjects to qualify for either the forestry exam or the range exam for the Forest Service. But when I got out of college, the Forest Service had a freeze on hiring, so I did not get hired permanently. But I took a temporary assignment and worked on an insect control project on the Wasatch National Forest. And I was there for about 6 months, and I did get a permanent assignment. And that was to come here as the assistant ranger. The entrance sign to Stanley said population 30. I had the good fortune of working with a wonderful group of people. Harold Wadley was a district ranger. And I'm going to pass this around while I run back. Tom just gave this to me this afternoon. But anyway, that's the individual I worked for, and I'll tell you, he was something else. Anyway, the rest of us, that was Frank Stillwell was the alternate ranger at the time, and his main responsibilities were timber management and fire control. Bill James was kind of a jack of all trades, and I might say master of all trades. He did equipment maintenance and, did whatever is necessary, campground patrols and things like that. I mentioned Frank. And Bill James, Bill's from Chalice. He was here back then. And he was a jack of all trades, also master of all. And he did equipment maintenance, campground maintenance, filled in wherever needed. Bonnie Stillwell, Frank's wife, was the district clerk, and she basically ran the place. She's also the receptionist. You know, she did a little bit of everything also. There was Ed Budell and Shorty Conyers were the backcountry packers. We had a huge string of horses back then, and Shorty took care of kind of the lower end of the Middle Fork, and Shorty took care of most of the upper end of the Middle Fork, and Ed was on downriver. So anyway, I'm going to talk about them a little bit later. There were other summer personnel such as, I got to go one more. Bill Renburn, I see his brother sitting back there. He was a recreation guard. And so, like I say, really a neat group of people. We all became greatest friends and had just a wonderful working relationship with one another. My primary responsibility was range management. I was hired as a range con, and I did all the range analysis on the district. I had a crew of 2 other people and me working together, and we'd go out for a week at a time and run range transects, collect range information on plant composition, production, and range suitability, and so on. And so, in the wintertime, a lot of the winter I spent compiling that data, and I had a chair in the office. The old office was right over there. I think you can see it from here. And I had a window. That looked right out through the Sawtooths. But that window had a glitch in it. It had you look out through it one way and you get one view of the Sawtooths, and then you shake your head a little bit or look at it a little differently, and you get a much different view of the Sawtooths. But they're all beautiful, as you can probably well imagine.
Is there something in the coffee?
It might be worth noting that Bill and John's father, Craig, he had the fence contract to build a log work fence along the Lolo and Stanley Highway, and had a fairly small crew and a team of horses, and they did that whole thing by hand, I think in about 2 summers. Just an amazing accomplishment in my eyes. Harold, the district ranger, he'd spent a lot of time on that highway also doing, making sure that all the multiple use coordination objectives were met and so on, and worked very closely with the highway superintendent. I need to take a moment and relate how fortunate I was to work for Harold Wadley. He is a remarkable individual, and I think one of the toughest and most intelligent people I had ever known. He redefined the word work ethic and what it means to be a public servant. He came to the Forest Service after serving in Korea, and he got captured in Korea and actually escaped, made his way across Korea in the winter, made it back to friendly lines. And so I think this is all very believable because he was an expert in winter survival. One of his pastimes while here was running cougar with a pack of hounds. And he would disappear and go chasing after his dogs in the wintertime, and if night caught him, he would just grab a couple of dogs, wrap around him, go down into a wheel of a tree, spend the night, get up the day, and continue the chase. And he always returned, never, just basically unscathed. I might add, he never shot a cat. He always turned him loose, just for the chase. Now, for more about Harold, I suggest that you read a book called Sergeant Reckless by Robin Hutt. It's really worth doing. And Sergeant Reckless was a little Mongolian mare that the Marines acquired in Korea, and the story's all about her. And she was probably the most decorated animal ever to serve in the military. And Harold got really heavily involved with a project called Sergeant Reckless, and it was involved with all her commemorations and events back in Washington, D.C. and so on. And she's got monuments built in honor of her and everything. And Harold's kind of been spearheading that whole project over the years. All of this can be Googled. It's really worth doing. Talk about a patriot. When Vietnam cooked off, Harold couldn't take it. Quit the Forest Service or took a leave of absence, re-upped, and went to Vietnam. And he was seriously wounded there, and got the Purple Heart and so on. He recovered and went on to finish a career with the Forest Service. Talk about a patriot, though. It was just, I think that's astounding. Person to do that, to go serve his country twice like that. Well, as you can imagine, winter was not considered a deterrent here on the district. And one year we had gotten a little behind on some of our summer projects, and one of them was to lay out a timber sale over here on Potato Mountain. Well, problem solved, we just do it in the winter. So we cached a camp up there on Potato Mountain, and come about January, we hiked in on snowshoes, set up the camp, which is a wall tent with a sheep herder stove in it, and went to work marking trees. And we knew it was cold, but we found out how cold it was later when we came out. But anyway, we had to keep the fire going in the sheep herder stove all night, just to keep from freezing to death. And then during the day when we were marking the timber, we'd have to stick a can of paint under our arms just to keep it warm, keep the paint from freezing. Well, we were in there for about a week or so, and we came out and got back to Stanley here to the station, and found out that it had been minus 45 degrees all week. So boy, did the hot springs across the valley creek here feel good. I have to say that those hot springs were later filled in by my friend Tom Kovalicky here. I guess they had become a public nuisance, but maybe a temptation, huh, Tom?
Yeah.
Well, although I didn't realize at the time, I guess my living conditions here could be considered a little bit austere. I lived in a surplus trailer, and as I recall, it had running water in the kitchen, but no shower, no bathtub. Saturday night bath before going to town to watch the blood run in the streets of Stanley. That's what I did, was have my Saturday night bath and went and did that. Then, anyway, the trailer had heat, but was not well insulated. I slept with my head next to a window, and many mornings when I woke up, there'd be about a 4-inch block of ice next to my head. So that didn't make, after Potato Mountain, that didn't seem to be too bad. I don't remember how much they took out of my paycheck for rent, but I think the government got the best end of the deal. I love to ski, and on most weekends I'd take off and I'd go over to Sun Valley to ski. And so one day I went over on a weekend and skied, and it started to snow. This is about 1965, as I recall. And it snowed all weekend, and I started for home on Sunday night, and the road was pretty covered with snow. And I got partway up Galena and got to one of those through cuts in the road, and it slid down on both sides. And I drove my car up into it. I got kind of stuck. Thought, well, I'm not going any further. There was the end of my forward progress, so I got myself dug out, went back to Ketchum and got my motel back and stayed there and skied for a couple of weeks until my money in my annual leave ran out. So anyway, it came time to kind of figure out what next to do, and so the road was avalanched both ways, downriver and on Galena. But they had gotten the road opened to within about 5 miles downriver here. There was a huge avalanche there. So anyway, I drove back around through Mackey and Clayton and so on, and got to the avalanche, and Bill James, I think, came down and picked me up, and I left my car there. I think it was there for about 2 more weeks before they got the road open. Another incident that I'll never forget was the night horse roundup. It was October, and a renegade outfitter had brought all of his horses in out of the Middle Fork and had turned them loose on the National Forest. Well, needless to say, I don't think this guy even knew the word permit, and the horses were in trespass. And of course, this was not going to stand, with Harold especially. So he went duly through the procedure he had to follow in order to do a trespass. And that's like advertising that, you know, the horses had to be gotten off the National Forest and so on. And if they weren't removed by a certain date, they would be impounded. So the date came and they were still there. And so one evening we saddled up and went out, found the horses, and got them started toward town. And like I say, we did this in the dark, and I really don't know why we did it in the dark, except maybe to keep the townspeople from seeing what we were doing or something. Anyway, we got them started, and then all of a sudden things got kind of western, and we were just galloping, hell-bent for election. You know, 4 of us behind the horses, and I felt something check my foot, kind of like that. Just got me kind of, and I thought, what the heck was that? And I looked back, and it was still just light enough I could see that I had ridden underneath a guy wire for a telephone pole and missed getting my head, decapitated, or at least injured fairly seriously. So I think that would have been a real blemish on an excellent safety record. Anyway, we got them in the corral and under chain and lock, and next day we got up and Harold called the Forest Supervisor's office and was talking to the range staff officer. And the range staff officer said, you haven't gone through quite the proper procedure and you have to release those horses. It was the only time I think I ever heard Harold use any profanity, and he said, you can take this telephone, and I won't use these exact words, put it where the sun does not shine. Anyway, Harold had to go to a meeting, and I was the one that actually ended up confronting the outfitter, and he came in the office and went on a tirade and told me that if I ever came to town to even get my mail, I'd get my ass kicked and so on. And I went to town and I didn't get my ass kicked. And I think what happened is that Bill and or Frank put the word out that if a hair on my head was touched, there would be serious consequences. And believe me, either was well capable of doing damage. I'll go back to Ed and Shorty, the Packers, for just a second or two. They were different as day and night, but much the same in skills. Both were outstanding backcountry horsemen and packers. And they could handle strings of horses and mules you can't imagine hardly today. And they could pack anything. It didn't matter what it was. And both were outstanding, just, in every respect. They were self-reliant, could do almost anything, and basically spent all summer, fall, that type of thing, back in the Middle Fork country. They come out occasionally, but more or less lived back there all the time. Ed was one of the last of the real old-time cowboys. Tremendous horseman, meticulous, clean cut, was a craftsman that made his own tack and so on, and didn't smoke or drink. Eddie, or Shorty rolled his own cigarettes, was seen to have a beer occasionally, and was somewhat unkempt. I had the pleasure of spending quite a bit of time with Shorty back on the Middle Fork. I was responsible for not only range analysis here in the district with the livestock, but with the game range analysis in the Middle Fork. So I was back there working, and I got a tour of the Middle Fork with Shorty that was just unforgettable. He knew that country, just every bit of it. And he was pretty quiet, but occasionally we'd be back in camp at night or something, and he'd start to talk a little bit. He said, "Jay, did you see that cougar track down there by Little Loon?" I hadn't. We'll talk about how times have changed with communication and things like that. It was, I was there in the fall of '63 when I was down there with Shorty, and Kennedy had been assassinated, and I didn't even hear about it until about 3 weeks later when I came out of the Middle Fork. I had an experience down there on the Middle Fork that I've almost forgotten to talk about it, but I was backpacking down the river. I was going to go do some work on Little Loon, as I recall, and I was walking along, and all of a sudden realized I probably wasn't totally alone. There was some rattling and things, some funny noise going around right behind me, beside me, and so on. I was right in the middle of a den of rattlesnakes, and they were all buzzing and carrying on. Oh. I made a mistake. I was carrying a pistol, and I shot a couple of them, and that really stirred things up. And I finally tiptoed my way out of there, and I didn't stop that night until I was back in the snow up Little Loon. Well, Shorty always rode a mule, and the mule's name was Pete. They'd been together for years and years. One day when Shorty was back in here at the office, Harold sensed something was wrong with Shorty. It just really bothering him. It finally came out that after all those years together, Pete had kicked Shorty. Just broke his heart. Shorty was a little ahead of his time. He loved to hunt chukars. And he wintered in Chalice, and down there at that time, I guess the chukar population was just off the scale. And Shorty'd go out with his 12 gauge, his old model 12 gauge, no dog, shoot a limit of chukars and get back to Chalice in a couple of hours. And I think he probably kept all the little widow ladies alive on chukar meat. I was born too late. Anyway, that's my story.
I got a microphone here. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, all right.
That's enough.
Well, I'm following in some real footsteps here, not only his footsteps, but the rangers before him and many other people. I drove up that highway and came around the curve from Lower Stanley in May of 1970. And those mountains on a sunny day just stopped my heart. And I had just transferred from Rock Springs, Wyoming, where the tallest thing was 3,000 oil derricks. And I looked at, I looked at all the scenery, and I said, this is going to be a movie. We're making a movie right here. And then all things started to happen at once. I found out when I got here, all 29 people had no structure to their lives whatsoever. Everything was grab and go. So I was approached after I moved into this house, and by the way, I was told by Harold, never store anything under the bed in the master bedroom because it'll freeze. And I figured, isn't that lovely? And I had a fireplace and I had an oil stove, and neither of which were good. Because, we hunkered in. And then I got a call from the mayor. He said, I'm also the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and he said every May we have a horseshoe tournament and a free picnic over here on this flat right across the river, and he said we want to make sure that you're the new guy getting invited. I didn't have a family, I came here single. I said, oh, I'd love to come to your horseshoe tournament and your free banquet. And so I showed up, and it was a beautiful sunny day in May, about 85 degrees, which was, you know, an anomaly. And I noticed everybody kind of like, you know, in small communities are either related or they're suspicious. And so you got to be a little bit careful about how you approach the challenges of living in an area that the federal badge is sometimes an irritant rather than a pleasure. You know? So he said, we're having a horseshoe tournament, and do you know how to play horseshoes? So I dumbed up really quick. I had been playing in tournaments all over Wyoming, and I figured this is a good time to lose. So I said, I'd be glad. He said, how about a wager? I said, sure, how much you want to wager? He said, well, you name it because you're new here. I said, oh, okay. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll bet you the goddamn ranger station against your bar. He looked at me and he said, can you do that? I said, I'm a ranger, I can do anything. He ran over to where his cohorts were quaffing beer and hot dogs, and he said, he wants to put the ranger station up instead of money. And they said, well, take it. Well, you know, we'll have a ranger station in our midst. So as it turned out, I won the tournament. And the whole crowd went numb. He ran over to his wife, and his wife was starting to cry. She says, what are we going to do without the barn? And we don't have a home anymore. So he comes back to me and he says, well, how do we work this out? I said, buy me a beer and I'll give you the goddamn bar back. That was my opening salvo to Stanley, and things from there became even more bizarre. The guns started showing up on the hips, and I found out that Rangers wore the only badge in this part of Custer County. There was no fire department, there was no nurse or clinic other than Betty Rember and Stella Critchfield. They would help out in a bad situation. There was no sheriff or deputy. It was just wide open country here. Just like Hollywood would do, you know. And I found out also that I made a mistake when I moved here. I had a Ford station wagon, and everybody was rubbing their hands together because there was no ambulance service here. And guess who became the ambulance driver at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning? Me and my Ford station wagon. We would be picking people up off the highway or the bars and driving them all the way to Sun Valley and trying to be a good neighbor and help out. And that kept going until Marie Osborne showed up, and you've heard that name. And she said, I'm going to organize you and Dave, and that was a big laugh. She said, we're going to make you guys EMTs. That was the original technicians, medical technicians. And you had to go to school for 81 hours, so we went through the schooling and then started an ambulance service with what she gave us was a 1958 Pontiac station wagon that was probably 32 feet long. It took 2 people to make it go around a curve. And so the blood began to dry up in my wagon, my station wagon, and we started using the Pontiac. And the story is about that episode of helping people who were in trouble was bizarre. And one of them that I'll share with you was that we got a phone call real late at night, and this was the hippie era, you gotta remember. And they were eating mushrooms and drinking beer in quantities up at Cape Horn, and they were all passing out and laying all over the ground, and they said, we need to save these people. So we ran up there with the ambulance, and were you with us, Dave?
I missed that.
You missed that.
I was laying on the ground.
Bruce Kaufman came with me, and Bruce was another one of my assistants. And we got there, and we said, who among you needs help the most? And 2 people raised their hands, so we threw them inside the ambulance and didn't tie them down in the gurney, just put them in there and we went. And we're going to Sun Valley at about 900 miles an hour, and what we found out was when you let one of them Pontiacs go around the corner, the body goes one way and the chassis goes the other. And these people were rolling off the gurney, back and forth, back and forth. Then they started throwing up. The inside of that ambulance was Technicolor, let me tell you. So I told Bruce, I said, for God's sake, slow down. He says, nope. He says, we got to get up in the hospital. And we did this all the way there, and we were just dripping wet with vomit. And, here comes the people out of the people are coming out of the emergency ward to help the victims, and they're reeling them away. And so we're trying to get cleaned up a little bit, and doctor comes out and he looks at me and he said, did you bring these people down here? I said, yeah. He said, well, they're dying from mushrooms poisoning, and he said, you saved their life by making them throw up. So, from that day on, we carried black Forest Service garbage bags. Everybody was slid into a garbage bag for the trip over the hill. And we got known as the garbage crew. But talking about more characters in my life, I needed an assistant here to run the range program. And Dave's name showed up on the roster. And I immediately got a phone call saying, don't hire him. He's a lot of trouble. He's goofy. And I figured, well, we need some goofiness. You know? And he just come home from Vietnam, and he was wired, and turned out to be a hell of a good hired hand, I'll tell you that. I was glad to have you on board, Dave.
And I never went out to Cape Horn again.
So look at Dave, let me bounce back to you. You got something you want to share?
I do. I think I'll stand up. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to tell you all that the truth is not in him.
Well, before I forget, and I get a little short-minded once in a while, if it wouldn't have been for Gary Gadwa and Laurie Gadwa, this museum wouldn't be what it is, and I think they deserve a huge So there was, I'm going to take you on a little trip if you'll stay with me, and I'll try to make it fast, but try to visualize, try to think that you're on a ship. And this, I'll come back here and tie it into this place. And you're going out of New Jersey and you're going towards the Soviet Union. And you can see inside of the ship, and there's a person in there by the name of Fletcher Fisher. He is, so the ship goes on up, it gets to Labrador, and then it cuts across southern Greenland, southern Iceland, and it heads up towards Norway, crosses the Arctic Circle. And the Germans were just bombing the heck out and torpedoing these ships. And he was on the ship, got torpedoed. Now, if you were there watching, everyone in that ship except him died. And he got steam and burned his lungs. And it kind of gave him a bad attitude, let's say, about the human race. So the next thing I know, he's at Clayton. So I go down to visit. He's got a mining claim down there and check that out. And so he grabs right a hold of me. And well, just before that, yeah, he was, what he was doing is mining people. And he'd get people to donate. He'd take them into this adit. And it looked really good. You know, all this gold and silver and et cetera, et cetera. It was really galena, which was pretty neat. But anyway, he'd take him in there, then he would say, get a donation, I'll get this going. Well, of course, he never got it going. And the SEC finally got a hold of him, the Securities Exchange Commission, and they put him in jail for 2 years. Well, he didn't have anything to do, so he studied up mining law. So the next thing that happened is he borrowed a shovel, signed out for it, went out and dug a discovery hole. And he staked a mining claim on the prison ground. He stirred them up, let me tell you. They had not taken their mineral, they did not withdraw it. And so then he came here, and he got out, just made him a lot smarter. So now what he would do, he would take people in, show them the adit, and he had a little, ore crusher. Run that, and they go, oh, this is really neat. And then he'd form a company, and when they got on his tail too much, why, he would dissolve the company and form a new one. So they couldn't track him, and then he'd go up, he was up Carbonate Creek in Slate Creek, which is a tributary. He'd drive with this incredible road, and he'd go to the Kermit Mine, and he'd hide out there for, you know, a couple of months. And then, so, one day I went down there to visit with him, and he took me back into the mine. You know, I thought, well, if he's going to go, I can go, you know, because he probably doesn't want to die. And because of the steam, he only had about 50% of his lung capacity. So he said, I got to make a living some way. This is how I do it. So he kind of told me how he was doing it. And I said, well, you know, I don't think that's really good. He said, well, hop in the truck. We'll go up and look at the Kermit Mine, and you should have seen this road. Holy cow. So we go up and we look around. We're coming back down, and it's almost vertical. And right at the bottom is a 6-foot tree, and it's just torn up. And there's one rig down, rolled over at the bottom of it, where people had come down this. And so he made it. So then we got to the bottom, and he says, hey, what do you think of this? And I'd just been studying about dynamite. And if you get fresh dynamite, you're in pretty good shape if somebody, you know, gives it to you. Well, he threw me a stick. And I caught it like this, and I knew about it, so I threw it back at him. And he started respecting me a little bit, which I thought was kind of neat. So the last thing he did that I know of, he did all kinds of things. He got 7 trailers, brand new, purchased them, drug them up there with his cat, tore them all to smash, but they still worked. Put them all in, and then he would bring people up and says, give me money, and I've got the man camp, and we're going to mine ore, and everything's going to go just really cool around here, so people can give money, you know, and then da-da-da-da. And I kind of started respecting him because he was getting away with all this. And then the company for the traders found out where he was at. So they got a guy in Chalice, paid him, I don't know how many $1,000 to repossess him. But the guy was too busy. So he went to Fletcher Fisher and said, will you repossess these trailers? So he repossessed his own trailer and got paid for it. And I told the folks in the Forester, I said, there aren't enough smart federal agents to do anything for this man.
Yeah, I can add to that pile of characters. We had a logger here by the name of Starvin' Marvin. He could never make a profit on all the timber sales that we sold him. And so winter came, and he had a timber sale going up towards Stanley Basin. And he said, I'm going to be here, I'm going to leave now. And he said, but I'm going to come back early in the spring, and I'm going to harvest this, and I'm going to do all the things that you guys want me to do, and we'll be friends again. And we said, okay, Starvin, go for it. So, winter came and the snow here was awesome. It was a huge winter. It was always below zero. And the snow on the Banner Summit was probably running 14, 15 feet, maybe, easy, you know. So here comes spring. And we all forgot about Starvin Marvin and figured, well, here's another timber sale that we'll have to foreclose on. And Starvin drove from Idaho City over to the Loban area, and he found out that the path was blocked with snow because they didn't plow 21 in those days. So he said, that's not going to stop me. He drug his pickup truck to the bottom of the pass where it was unplowed, of course, rolled the truck over upside down on its roof and put a cat in front of it and started dragging the car, the pickup truck, cab down, wheels up. And finally he made it over the pass. I think it must have taken him 2 days to get here. And he walked into town and into the ranger station. He says, I'm here to start logging. And where you been, Starvin? He says, well, he said, it's slow going when you turn your pickup truck over upside down. He says, I need oil right away. But that's the kind of people that we were dealing with on a daily basis. I want to share with you the drama that occurred in this valley when the Public Law 92-400 was passed to make this into a national recreation area rather than just a ho-hum ranger district. When I was told I was coming here, it was an era in the Forest Service where you didn't apply for jobs. They just told you when you were going and when to pack and when you were going to leave. And they said, you're going to Stanley to help us usher in the new era of the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. And that was pretty exciting because the Forest Service has always been paranoid about the Park Service sneaking in late at night and taking all this away from you. No more logging, no more grazing, no more this, no more that. And my job, and they told me in black and white, don't let the Park Service win the hearts and minds of the people in Custer County. And they said, what do you need to make that happen? Can you make it happen? I said, sure, that's gonna be no problem. They said,
Get
well, what
Kimpton.
do you need? I said, I need a fax machine, which was a no-no in those days. Nobody in the world, everybody in the world had a fax machine except the Forest Service. It had to be some sort of an evil piece of equipment. So I got a fax machine, and he said, what else you want? I said, I need a copy machine. And they were all sucking in their breath, because in those days you made copies by cranking a mimeograph machine with ink that ran all over the damn place. You know? We got a real nice copier, okay? And then I said, I want a telephone with an answering machine, and I don't have to pay for it. And they said, well, why do you want an answering machine? So I said, so I can answer people. I mean, how more clever could I be? So I got all those issues and put out on the counter at the new ranger station that we built up here on the hill. And we went to work and we did one thing. We asked the locals, what's your biggest fear that we can't hunt anymore? Bingo. There was the magic word. Don't let the Park Service in because you can't hunt no more. And every time you had a beer, you'd say, here's the hunting. And the locals would kind of look at you saying, they're okay. They're okay. And that actually happened, and I'm being facetious, of course, but that actually happened. It was the it was the promise of more regulations than what the locals wanted or expected from government. And as a result of that, the SNRA bill was passed with flying colors and ratified by Congress, saying it's the Forest Service who will be in charge, not the Park Service. So that was pretty exciting, because that lasted for about 2 years of open houses saying, yep, we're going to go hunting in the morning. And of course, the three cities, Lower Stanley, and Sawtooth City, or Smiley Creek, were aghast that the bill that would stop them from having community growth. And it didn't, but it was a scary moment for everybody that our life is going to change in Stanley Basin. Like one morning I got up, and right here in front of the flagpole there, we used to park my car or I had a truck then, and I plug it in to keep the heater going all night long. And I got out of the house here, and I walked outside, and I opened up the door to the truck, grabbed the steering wheel, and you know how you pull yourself into a truck? Well, I pulled the steering wheel to me and broke it right in half. It was 45 below zero. And I got up to town here, I got up to the ranger station, trying to move those 2 broken pieces of plastic back and forth, you know. But that's, you know, that came with the territory. So Dave, you got something else you want to add?
Well, yeah, you're talking about Starving Marvin, the year that Evel Knievel jumped the Snake River, went down to the bar, and he's in there about half drunk laughing. He said, this is really cool. He says, come out here. And we looked, and he had his cat up there on top of that peak over by the House of Doom, that new house there. And it was doing this, and he says, I'm going to jump Valley Creek if Evel Knievel can jump the Snake River. And we thought that was the funniest thing ever. But now, one thing I would like to say is, we all have white hair up here, the 3 of us, and it really makes us mad when people think we're old. I almost didn't come because I heard there were going to be 3 old guys talking. But anyway, we just turned prematurely gray. The thing that really bothers me, though, when I add it up, there's 242 years of experience right here with the 3 of us. I'm thinking maybe we can get another 40 or 50 between us.
Well, I love the episode that happened one winter. It was February. We were all getting cabin crazy from being, you know, waiting for spring to come and doing all the planning and all that stuff. You know, there was not much excitement in that office except more planning. But finally I told the staff, I said, look, there was 5 of us working there year round. I said, look, beer's on me tonight. After work, 5 o'clock, let's all meet at the Stanley Club, and we'll have a beer and kind of unwind and, you know, get rid of the winter blues. So, you know, you can imagine how excited 5 people can get in the middle of nowhere. They said, yeah, we'll be there, we'll be there. So we went, me and Kimpton and Kaufman and Bill James and Jolene Steele, who was our secretary. Local gal, and like you said, she ran the ranger district. Yeah, right, okay. So we get in the bar, we're the only ones there. Wind's blowing like crazy, it's 20 below zero or whatever, and there's this one man sitting down at the end of the bar, all hunched over a bottle of beer, and he's drinking and mumbling. Finally he comes up and starts wobbling towards Jolene and starts pestering her and making bad comments, and so we said, go back and, you know, enjoy your beer, and he started all over again. And he says, I'm gonna whip you. And I figured, oh God, here comes another whipping. So I'm getting ready. I got my eyeglasses laying on the bar, and Bruce Kaufman my other assistant pokes me and he whispers to me in my ear. He says, I'm over 40 years old and I've never been in a fight. Can I fight him for you? And I said, you're damn right you can. So Bruce gets up off the bar stool and he wanders over to the men's room and we hear some noise in there and we go, what the hell is going on? And out he comes with a mop. Walks over to this miner and whacks him right alongside the head with the mop. The guy went skidding right across the damn bar floor. Took one look at us, put his jacket on and left. But that was another Stanley episode of making things work with the locals.
I'm going to have to add a couple things. Harold was pretty well respected by the people here. And he had a great friend, Bill Woolley. Bill lived across the river, right over there. And he'd come to town across the bridge over here. And talk about an eccentric, but he and Harold got along really, really well. In fact, they hunted, they ran cats together and things like that. But like I say, he was really eccentric. And can you guess what kind of a car he drove?
MG.
An MGTD, that's correct. Well, you want to hear about Bear Claw?
Yeah.
So this kid comes up, he's about 19 years old. And you know, you joke a lot about the hippie era. Well, there was a lot of problems with it here. People moved into the old mines and tried to live there, and there was broken glass everywhere. But anyway, this kid was going to live like the Indians did. Bought a teepee, came in and said, I'm living there all year. And he had this big necklace of, I don't know where he got it, of puka beads, and then the last three were claws from a bear. And he said, I'm going to be native. And I said, you know, even the Indians were smarter than this. They went down the river in the winter. So he went out and he'd go down to the hot springs once in a while. And he had leathers. And as the winter progressed, the leathers turned black. And I am not kidding. I don't think he really got into the hot spring. And right up where Mackey is, there used to be a little teeny bar there. And we'd go in every night because we thought that was neat. And, you know, get our 6-pack apiece or whatever it might have been. And I heard this scream out of distance. So we went out. Well, the guy went out and then he came back and I went out. And Bear Claw was skiing across the way over there and he crashed. Broke his leg all to smash. And luckily we heard him. You know, it was cold. It wasn't bad. It was mid-teens probably. So anyway, we got over there and we got him picked up. And we brought him back in and we put him in the 58th ambulance. And man, you want to talk about a smell. Ooh. Plus, the floorboard on the passenger side had a hole in it. So you get quite a bit of this exhaust because the muffler wasn't quite right. So, and it was cold, so we had to roll all the windows down. And he stunk like, oh my God. And we had sleeping bags we just dumped on him. And we head over the hill, we got over Galena, we went to St. Moritz, and the doctor came out, wheeled him in, the nurse came in, and she went like to take his shirt off, and she went, oh my God. And she went and got a bucket full of Clorox and water. Came back in, pulled his shirt back, and she took that sponge and went like this, and it went from black to white. I have never seen anything. And she'd have to leave once in a while or she was going to vomit. So we hauled out of there by the time.
Yeah, we just got the 5-minute signal. Yeah, and they're going to bring us buckets of beer.
Ice, please.
Yeah, right. So,
Whiskey.
Whiskey, okay. There's dozens more stories that are bizarre beyond belief, like this beautiful hot spring we had just right across the creek here. No, not across the river, but across the yeah, beautiful hot springs. And back in the CCC days, they built a gorgeous hot springs and they lined it with tile. and there was a dressing room to take your, you know, put your bathing suit on and so forth. But when the hippie era hit here, everything here was nothing but chaos, with people moving into whatever, like Dave said, they could find to live in, these old mining shacks, and they try to take over this hot spring. And of course, I'm living right here, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm listening to some kind of hard rock beat, and the marijuana smoke is coming into the bedroom and going out the other room, and cars and everything, and I go out and I chase them all home, and the minute I fell asleep, here they come back again. But what really took the cake after 1 year of trying to, you know, bring some sensibility into using that hot springs, they all took their clothes off, stood naked on the roof at 12 noon instead of 1 or 3 a.m. like was customary. And who should drive by but the county commissioner's wife? And they're jumping up and down, yelling and screaming at her to come in and jump in the hot pool. She got the chalice, told my boss that the ranger up there was totally irresponsible, having parties all night long up there. And I got the phone call and he says, do something about it. So what we did was, we knew we had to act fast. I ordered 5 dump trucks of pure gravel, no dirt, just pure gravel. And we dismantled the dressing room, which was made out of logs, and we piled those logs up like there was never a building there. And then we backed the dump trucks in there and filled the pool up with gravel, pure gravel, and then smoothed it all over with. And come morning, people said, where the hell is the hot spring? And I said something about spacecrafts. And that worked for a while. And the nice part about it is, if you ever get ambitious, take a shovel and see if you can't find that hot springs out there. Throw all that gravel out and start over again.
That's my bathtub.
It was, and not only that, but believe it or not, people here locally depended on that hot springs to get their Saturday night bath. And you know, it took a while to let that soak in, that you actually hurt their routine, you know. But that was another episode of what could happen in a remote community. The good one was when we were having motorcycle gangs show up, 50 to 100 of them at a time. They would take over Redfish Lake, take over Stanley Lake. And we, in our little badges, couldn't handle that. That was just more firepower than we had. So I called up the state police and told them what the situation was. And they said, not to worry, I'll send a trooper up in the morning for the 4th of July weekend. And he knocks on my door and he said, are you the ranger? I said, yeah. He said, I got help for you. Follow me. So I followed him outside, and he opened up the trunk to his patrol car, and there were 19 baseball bats in there. And he said, hand these out to your people. He said, they really work good on people who don't listen. And then drove off back to Boise. And I wished I still had those baseball bats. But that's the way we operated. You know, it was just one exciting decision-making process after another.
So what's the story? Are we through, or?
We have some time for 1 or 2 questions if anybody has a question.
He has a question.
Okay, go for it, Wayne.
Well, whatever happened to those baseball bats?
They must be in the police locker room somewhere there. I refuse to take them. Oddly enough, in those days, believe it or not, it was a felony to shoot a federal chicken inspector. If you shot one of them, it was a felony. If you shot a U.S. Forest Service Ranger, it was a misdemeanor. So you had to be a little careful. Certain things.
If you could change one thing, each of you, what would it be? Change one thing in the SNRA, what would it be?
Nothing. I would get back to the point where if there's some indiscriminate building that's gross, I would like to see something done about it.
And as we leave you, if you listen carefully at 1 a.m. in the morning, you can hear the thousands of Chinook salmon that used to spawn in this little valley creek right here that are not here anymore because we're not paying attention to what our resources for Idaho represent. You know, that many Chinook swimming 900 miles to get back to Stanley, Idaho, and the slapping of those tails used to keep you awake at night. That's how many salmon used to come here. And now we're on the verge of never seeing that happen again.
I'll retract nothing.
All right.
Dave,
Oh, yeah.
He's got a question.
can you tell us about the use of the laundromat one time?
Well, I think a few of you probably heard that story, but there was a guy by the name of Jess Lynch, came up every spring, went to the Stanley Basin, camped, had mining claims, came in, drank, smoked heavily, took a bath once a week. He'd come up early enough in the spring that he couldn't drive in. So one time, long story short, he's out there and he didn't come in that Saturday night. So we're going, oh, come on, what's going on? So I grabbed Bruce Kaufman, or he grabbed me, we took a four-wheel drive out, broke through the snowbanks, and there he was laying in the road dead. He'd had a heart attack. And I thought, well, you know, that's not too bad. He was 58 years old. I thought that was old in those days. But anyway, so we got the coroner up and we got him into town. And he had one sister. And she came in and thought that the coroner, well, that he looked so good that he should lay in state. So I go, well, that makes sense. So we came over to the little cemetery here, and we dug that grave by hand. And then we went back, and the next day I went down to see him lying in state. I couldn't see him anywhere. And then this woman runs out of the laundromat, hauling butt, let me tell you. And I'm going, uh-oh. So I walked in there, and on the folding table is Jess. And he did look good. He wasn't even in I don't remember him being in a coffin. How about you? You were here then, I think. Oh, yeah, just... So everybody did their thing. They went around and around, and then they left. So we took him out to the cemetery, and we took off our coveralls. Or we put them on, I don't know which, put them on probably. And we covered him up, and we had a fifth of whiskey. And we went around, each one of us, when we got to Jess, we gave him a drink. And went around, well, took a drink.
What was your favorite parking spot when you come to town in the winter on your snowmobile? Where did you park?
In front of the Garden Run Club. Yeah. I could tell you that one of our staff members found how to park his snowmobile when he went to uptown to buy whiskey. The snowplow made a big mound in front of the liquor store, and he hit that too fast with his snowmobile and went right through the front window. and his snowmobile is parked and purring right in front of the liquor display. And the owner came out and he says, "Do you have any Jack Daniels?" That's sort of what happened.
The truth is not in it.
I used to wake up every Monday morning and look at Dave and say, "This is the day we get fired." One of my staff accidentally hooked the town Christmas tree at 3 a.m. in the morning after the bars closed, and we were going home, and his rudder clipped the cord, the electric cord, and he drug that Christmas tree for 3 miles.
Yeah, Christmas trees. I went into town one time at Christmas, and they'd go out and bootleg the tree, and it really bothered me, so I'd buy a tag for it. Anyway, it was in the middle of the road there by McCoy's old tackle shop. And the guy on the city council thought it was a hazard, so he hooked onto it and pulled it over to the side of the road. Well, some people in town didn't think that was very cool, so they pulled it back. And this went on 3 or 4 times. And finally, the last time, the guy with the little cat tipped it over and broke all the bulbs and everything. And then he went home. Well, he drug it off again. And there was a little riot in town. There was about 8 people came out of the hotel. They said, "Kill da-da, kill da-da," and they're chanting, and they go around to his house, and he broke out of the house, scampered clear over to the old Quonset hut, which used to be the school, and the deputy's office. And then we had a deputy, and said, "Protect me." It's the only riot I ever saw in town.
And this is too good to pass up, but the Stanley Club caught on fire in February, and it was a log building over probably 100 years old, and it had a dance floor where you danced uphill and then you coasted down the other side. And it was just a delightful place to drink beer and listen to cowboy music and do the two-step, you know. So the damn thing catches on fire. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. My phone rings. They said the Stanley Club is on fire. Do something. Well, everything we had was drained dry. There was no fire trucks in town. So we went up there, and sure enough, the old Stanley Club was going to go, you know, to its graveyard. So we got smart and said, "Look at his house is right next door." The owner was missing. He was gone on vacation. And so we figured we'll save all his furniture, and we put it out in the middle of the street, right alongside where the bar was, and they just left it there and then kept the fire from burning his house down. He comes back about, I don't know, 2 or 3 days later, and he said, "Did you get my money?" And we said, "What money?" He said, "Well, I got $14,000 in the freezers." And he had been saving silver dollars in mason jars and put them in the freezer because no one would ever look for silver dollars in a freezer, right? So there they, 14 grand sitting out in the middle of the street for a He was appreciative.
All right, so thank you guys. Thank you everybody for coming out this evening. These guys will be hanging out for the next 20 or so minutes before we have to go to dinner. So feel free to hang out, mingle, check out our sales table, become a member, drop a donation. You know the routine. If you guys want to come back next week, which I hope you do, we'll be having Brian Jackson out here, and he's going to talk to us about astronomy before Galileo. So, thank you again for all coming out tonight, and we'll see you guys later.
You are. It's good. I had
Been out on your bike?
Yeah, we went
went up to Basin Creek yesterday.
Oh, very nice.
Look up.
Basin View.